Hey there to all you rebellious souls out there. It is great to have you here. I'm truly excited to inspire you again today, and I hope that this podcast episode will ignite a new fire within you. So enjoy, and you know what? Feel free to reach out if I can support you in any way. Have a good one. Hello and welcome. I am very excited to be with you today because I get to share with you on one of the skills, qualities that you and I are experiencing every day, that we're practicing every day. In fact, I would say that without this, life could not exist. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about communication. Now, I've been in communication for nearly 2 decades. From the moment that I decided, you know what, I am good at something here, and I'm very interested in communication and how we get to, exchange information and how the subconscious also is involved there. So I decided to go to university, study communication, ended up in business. With a big focus on business communication and the use of words to really convey a story. However, what always fascinated me a lot more than just the business side of things was how information is exchanged between human beings. Now, the modern definition of communication is that this is all about an exchange of information through the use of media. I find that a little bit, not just a little bit, I find it very limited, especially because when we think of media, what comes to mind here is, for example, using devices, using different platforms, etc. However, that's the modern take on it. But when you look at the history, when you look at how we, in essence, are created, when we look at life, then life exists because there is an exchange of information all the time. I find that very beautiful when you think of, for example, how an ecosystem is naturally balanced. The natural ecosystem, how all the different plants and creatures and the soil, all the bacteria, how they communicate with each other to keep the balance in place. I was actually taking a walk in the forest this morning. It was really nice. There was a little sign up that made this beautiful analogy of how the roots of all the trees are interconnected in the soil and basically have this huge network of internet connections. So it is like a natural internet in the forest, because they exchange information, and if one tree needs a little bit more of this or of that, then the other trees can give that. And this has been scientifically proven in recent years, that there is literally a taking care of each other by asking and providing in nature, in trees. And I find that extremely beautiful, because it really shows us, the importance of working together, of sharing information with each other. When you look at what the word really means, where communication comes from the Latin word comunicare, this means to share. So in essence, whenever there's communication happening, there is a sharing happening. The beauty of this is, of course, that we get to share information that other people otherwise wouldn't know, because, when we have something in our minds, we have a thought, we have a longing, we want to go on a trip, for example. And if we don't share that with the people in our lives, then they might not know that, we want to go with them. So, you share it. If I have a desire to take you to the movies, then I would need to share that with you. Otherwise, you have no idea and you're going to make other plans. Now, this is a pretty straightforward example, and we all get that this is this is how communication works. However, obviously, there are so many layers in communication that sometimes we're not that aware of. Because what I love about how communication also works is the sharing is not just the conscious part. It is not just that which we see or hear. It is also the layer of the subconscious. In essence, when we communicate, especially, and if we express something, we're sharing our words, we're sharing our thoughts. There are many layers to that communication, to that message. The message doesn't only say something about, the factual meaning of the words, for example. It also shows something about ourselves. It shows where we're at. It shows how we see ourselves. It shows something about the relationship at hand. When you look at the different communication models, and I won't bother you too much with this, but this is a principle that has been in the field for quite a long time, that there are different layers in communication. And I've always been very intrigued by that. And yet I found at some point that the existing models that I was working with, they also lacked a little bit of inspiration, if you ask me. They made it very insightful. They showed, what happens in communication. It shows that, there can be noise that influences the effect of communication. It could be that, for example, you're in a busy environment and there is a lot of people talking around you, which means that you may not hear the person you're talking to that well, and that could, create a little bit of a of a disturbance, meaning that you might not get the message across as good as you can. So there can be noise, but what is also so interesting is the noise that is created by the subconscious, meaning that all the information that you're receiving is also going through a filter in your brain. And you might not be aware of that. Or the other way around, the information that you're sharing with someone is going through their filter. Now, there's one thing about the brain that you need to know, and that is that it tends to delete, distort, and generalize. What that means is that sometimes when the brain feels that certain information is just not relevant, or it doesn't hook on to anything it already knows, then it basically just deletes it. It's like, okay, this is not information I know. It's the first time I'm hearing it. I'm just going to forget about it. Could also be the other way around, that you're surprised, but then there's already like a hook there. But generally, the brain tends to delete if something is irrelevant or maybe too much to handle at that point. It also tends to generalize, which means that as soon as information comes through in the brain, it's like, okay, so that goes on that pile with all the information that, all the data that I already have that supports this belief. And consequently, you may feel that someone's compliment, which you've heard many times before in a certain situation, is generally just a way for them to actually get something from you. You might be generalizing their intention, generalizing their sincere compliment, and thinking that they don't really mean it. And so you're generalizing that piece of information that's coming through. And the brain tends to distort, which means that, the information comes in and something completely different it's translated into something completely different in your brain. So it becomes distorted. There is no, it is not how it was intended by the one who's sending it. There is literally something weird happening there because, our brains can be a little bit crooked, to put it not so mildly. And this is a very human thing, we're human beings. So our brain has the intention to protect us, so sometimes it does weird things. However, that does something to the communication, because what happens is that because we might get triggered if our brain catches something and it's filtered through um, what we believe to be true, and the message gets distorted and changed, etc., we might respond to that or react to that. That's the better word. We might react to that in a way that is actually not really necessary, and it shows where we are at. So, for example, someone tries to give you some positive feedback, and they're saying it in a way that you are translating that into criticism. Your first reaction might be to defend yourself, like, hey, but this is not true. Or, yeah, but you're also doing this and that. And this is especially when you're very close to someone. So let's say your romantic partner, this can become a very icky dynamic at some point, because you're so close. You're in such a close environment with each other. You see each other on a daily basis. So the safety that you get, which is amazing, also can lead to, a little bit less care, where everything that they're saying feels like criticism. And maybe it is. It could also very well be that there's also a part of critique that they're giving. But if you're hearing it all as criticism, well, it's no wonder that at some point, that's just how your brain works as well. You can become defensive. And that's just one example. So it could be that your brain is distorting so much of the information that it is receiving, all that data that it already had, it is connecting to that data, and therefore it will influence, how you react to that situation. And this is exactly why communication is such an important quality or skill for you to develop, and why it is directly linked to your ability to reflect on yourself. Because if you want your relationships to really succeed and for yourself to feel better, what is important is that you learn to understand that mechanism of how your brain works, that you learn to understand how your brain might be distorting the information it gets, and how this is influencing your direct communication with your lover, with your friends, with your coworkers, etc. Because it might just be that your initial reaction maybe is just not really necessary. It could be that another response is possible. And that's where the gold really lies. So the question is then, how can you shift this? How can you make sure that your reaction turns into a response? And what I've done over the past few months is, I felt inside like, okay, so I have nearly 20 years of experience in communication. I have a lot of experience with different forms of relationships, and everything in communication is about the relationships that you have, and it shows so much. And I decided to integrate that into a model, a framework, so to say. What I wanted to do is to actually merge the existing frameworks that I've been working with for so many years, which I love, but they only gave insight in what's happening. They didn't give a hands-on tool, and I wanted to make it more hands-on. I decided, what can I bring this world? What can I bring you now as a listener, so that you understand a little bit more about what happens in communication, how you could, take more responsibility here, so that your relationships can become better, because you learn to communicate more effectively, with more care, and because you take ownership, you take the lead in your life. Now, if you listen to the previous podcast, you might have heard me say that the most important influence that you can have on relationships is the influence on yourself, is by training your inner leadership muscle, by becoming a truly sovereign being. And part of that evolution, of that development within yourself, is learning to communicate with care. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about the framework that I've developed over the past few months, because it might really help you. And if you go on my website, michellekoops.com, you can see that in the section with free stuff, you can download it in both English as well as in Dutch, and you will get more a free video training there as well. But in this podcast, I would like to go over the few steps, the 6 steps that are in this framework, so that you understand it a little bit better, and actually so that you can already reflect on yourself, like, hey, oh, I could do this, yeah, or I could work on that. Because what the framework really offers, and what I would like for you to really understand, is that your communication, it shows a lot, and it invites you as well. So it shows, it exposes on, exposes which parts you might still need to do some work on. It also shows what you're really good at. And therefore, it invites you to take the entrance into deepening. You could say that the 6 steps in the framework are each an opening. They're each an entrance into, to focus on. So that these parts of you are better developed, so that you can really improve your skills here. So in the center of the framework, I'm not going to go over the entire framework, because you can really get that in the free training. The core of the framework shows you the sacred circle. So the framework itself is called the 6 commitments, and in the heart of that is the sacred circle. Now, the word sacred is an acronym, and that means that every letter in the word sacred is one step in this system. So starting with the S of sacred, what I mean to say here is that you create an environment in which safety is ensured, and this is a step I secure. The S stands for secure. This quality of safety, if you ask me, is crucial in effective communication. If you want your message to come across, or if you want to really receive someone's message, what we need essentially as human beings is to feel safe. Because if our system feels safe, then we can open up. If we don't feel safe, we close down, and basically we cannot let the information come through, and we get to that place of distortion, generalization, and deleting, etc., etc. So we want our system to be as open as it can be, so that we can actually hear what is being said, and so that we can feel safe enough to express ourselves. So my question to you is then, what do you do to create a safe space so that beautiful communication can happen, especially, for example, in a situation that feels very threatening or precarious, or for example, in conflict, especially with a friend, or with could also be in a work situation, or with your partner. How will you create a space so that you each feel that you won't be disturbed, that you feel safe, that you feel free enough to express, that you feel connected enough, so that even these sensitive, precarious, expressions can come through. Then the second step, so that would be the A. The letter A stands for I ask. And what I mean with I ask is that you take on an attitude of curiosity. It's very easy at some point. It becomes almost like a habit, or the dynamic between you and a certain person that you've known for a long time. If after a while you get certain dynamics. And it becomes, the more the dynamic manifests in the relationship, the more we close down from really wanting to get to know the other person, because we think we already know them. And what you actually can see is that there's a level of closing down and a lack of curiosity. However, sometimes it also might mean that we're interpreting some of the information that they're sending in a certain way, and we think that we know that we're interpreting it right. However, we don't always. Not everything they say needs to be seen as an attack. And also the other way around, we might be communicating from a place of blame, for example, instead of and assuming that's the bitch here, so to speak, is that we assume to know what's going on without really checking or verifying. So the act of, or the attitude of curiosity is about asking without assuming, really being curious about what the other person means, and if you're not sure, you really ask to verify. This is a beautiful one. I really do this with my partner as well. Whenever I am not sure how he means something, instead of assuming, which sometimes can happen, my initial reaction could be like, what the fuck is he saying now, the asshole? And then I listen to the voice note. It happens in voice notes every now and then. And then I listen to the voice note again a second time, and I hear something completely different. So sometimes that can confuse me, like, what's the real thing, you know? And I ask him, so hey, what did you mean by that? And what that prevents is a whole lot of hassle and misunderstandings and fights that you really don't want to get into. Now, obviously, I'm only human and we're all just human, so sometimes we can make mistakes here, but asking without assuming helps so much. So the third step in the 6 commitments is all about clarifying. I clarify. What clarification really brings us is, to be sure about what is being said here, and to make sure that you get met in your needs and your desires and your boundaries. If you are not clear to other people about what you need, then you cannot expect them to give it to you. And here's often, this is a very interesting thing. We sometimes have certain expectations. We want people to live up to certain expectations. We want them to honor our boundaries. But what if we haven't communicated them? How were they supposed to have the information if there hasn't been an exchange of information? So you haven't communicated it. And in that case, I would say this is difficult because it requires you to, first of all, know what you want, feel your boundaries really, and second, then also be able to communicate them. Now, it's very interesting because a lot can come up this way. If you're not in touch with your own desires, if you are very, very afraid of being judged and rejected by your partner or by your friends for communicating them, then chances are you're going to shut down, or you're going to just keep it to yourself. And that's where, a lot of misunderstanding can happen. And sometimes, people's the dynamic gets pretty fucked up because there's no clarity on where you are in certain aspects of your life or in the relationship. So you need to be as clear as you can and learn to communicate clearly. Now, step number 4. The R is for I receive. The quality of receptivity is so profound, I would say, because it's really about how you can receive the other person and how you can receive yourself first and foremost. Everything that I'm sharing here, all the steps, are really also an entrance into yourself, not necessarily just about the us part, the relationship. It's also about you. So in the first step, when I'm talking about security and safety, how can you give that to yourself? It's about you feeling safe within you. So also with receiving, how can you receive yourself fully? And with that, I mean that you receive yourself with all of your flaws, that you receive yourself also with your needs and desires and your wants, that you receive yourself in your excitement, in your joy, and also in your sadness. Because when you're able to receive yourself fully, that's when you can also be compassionate and really receive the other person. Now, another element of really receiving is that you actively listen. Just imagine if you're talking to someone who's close to you, and you're expressing something about, well, whether it's something deep because it's something personal, or whether it's just an everyday thing that still brought a lot of joy to you. Imagine that they're constantly looking at the TV in the meantime, or that they're on their phone, they're only half present, it can really create a feeling of unsafety there, because you don't know if you're being received. You don't know if they're actually hearing what you're saying. So receptivity is a quality that you both want to develop in yourself, and is also something that you would like to receive from the other. So there's a reciprocity here. And it really, because it's so multi-layered and it's such a profound quality, I really believe that this is crucial in establishing healthy relationships. Because without being receptive of yourself, for example, how can you be receptive of the other? Then quality number 5, the 5th commitment, I would say, is I encourage. And this really is about the quality of gratitude. Being grateful for what is, being grateful for this other person in your life. Whether it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your sister, it's your friend, it's your partner, your coworker. I've said it, really, this is about every relationship, and really appreciating them. It's so beautiful to receive from someone else that they appreciate you. So can you imagine how it is for them as well? And also, it's often really nice to give that to someone, to show your appreciation, to show how you see them. The quality of encouraging someone, I encourage, is also that you show, that you see them in the full human being that they are. Now, in a romantic relationship, this can become very interesting because we tend to sometimes start merging with the other person as if there's only an us. And we become so entangled together, especially after a while, that you kind of forget to really see, because you're so close to each other that then you can hardly see the other person. This is also, when someone gets too close, you can only see their eyes, literally. When they're physically close to you, you can only see their eyes. You cannot see their entire posture. They need to take a few steps back for you to really see the entire human being that is standing there. And that is also in the energetic sense, when someone is very, very close, and we crave that. We crave closeness and intimacy. However, there is a risk here that you don't really see that person anymore, because there's so much proximity, there's so much an intertwinedness that we tend to overly identify as if that person is an extension of ourselves, whereas they're actually an individual. So with encouragement, I also mean that you're really looking at them as a full human being, so that you are able to appreciate their individuality, so that you are able to build them up as the person that they are, helping them grow, helping to supporting them, being the cheerleader in their life. And to be able to do that, you got to have a little distance there, and to see them, to really be able to encourage them there. Yeah, and that's an very interesting polarity here, like proximity versus distance, the closeness versus the, I would say it's still close, but there's a little bit more like a mystery. But this is something for a whole different topic, and this is something that Esther Perel also talks about a lot. I'm a big fan of her. I train with her at the moment. So that's for a different podcast. Let's quickly move on to the last commitment in the framework, which is I discern. I discern is all about the quality of ownership, and really owning your part. And that means that you're able to discern between what's yours and what's theirs, to discern between what's real and what's the story that you're creating in your head, to discern between what was in the past versus what is right here, right now happening, to discern between your role as a partner now or a role as a friend versus the role of, the caretaker, the parent, the sister, etc. Because, to really be able to discern that, and also to see your partner as your partner and not as your dad or your mother. This quality of discernment really helps to keep the relationship in a healthy and balanced place. And if you notice that something in the dynamic is shifting, then ask yourself, so who am I projecting onto them? I've had that in both friendships as well as in relationships, that unconsciously I started projecting certain expectations onto them, as if I didn't put them in the role that they were in the role of friend or in the role of partner. I unconsciously made them to be my mother, my father, you name it. And this is something that we all do. So I'm using myself as an example, but you could even say that it is humanly impossible to do without projections. However, it is the awareness about this that can help us to, take that away. And a projection, if you're not clear on what a projection really is, a projection is basically the image that you project onto someone else of how you feel that they should be. So it's very much around expectations. Like, hey, I expect you to be like this and like that, because I have an ideal image of what you should look like, or what you should be like, how you should interact with me. And if we do that, then we really don't see who they are. So we need to learn to discern that. What this framework, the sacred circle, with all these 6 steps, basically, these 6 qualities, really shows us is that the communication is so much more than communication itself. It's so much more than an exchange of information. It is an entrance. It is something that exposes, it shows us our own flaws. And instead of feeling that it exposes everything that you fail at, I would like to invite you to see it as an opportunity to really develop more parts of yourself and go through it step by step. So it doesn't mean that you need to do it right from the start, that you need to be able to be perfect at this, but just look at it. If you would download this framework and you get the training yourself, you can really see, like, hey, this is something I'm not really good at. I really need to learn. It's, for me, very important that, for example, I learn to clarify. Something I would like to learn more of. Or I would like to learn to discern more and really take ownership. Now you can imagine that this in itself, that every entrance, every commitment is an entrance that you can go deep and deeper and deeper in. And you might not want to do that alone, or you might not know how to, which I understand. And in that case, I would love to invite you to contact me, and so that we can tune in together and see how you could develop a deeper sense of sovereignty within yourself and develop your communication skills and really do the work here. Because this is about shadow work. This is about, facing yourself and the pieces that you might not be good at yet, so that you can transform that into magnificence, the magnificent, beautiful creature that you are, that is so deserving of healthy, loving connections and relationships. And that is something that I want for you. That is something that I really believe is possible for you. No matter what happens right now, no matter the attachment system, no matter what has happened in your past, you deserve that. So if there's anything that I can support you with, then let me know. And like I said, go to michellekoops.com, download the framework. It is very valuable because it's really going to support you with your relationships. And for now, I'm going to wish you a magical day, and see you next time. Thank you again for listening to this podcast. I hope that you will take all the inspiration with you in the rest of your day. If there's anything I can support you with, please check the website beabrandrebel.com or michellecoops.com, or reach out to me on Instagram at michellecoops. And remember, stay rebelicious.